The butterfly earring under my couch cushion belonged to my cousin, and it was about to become the evidence that would destroy two lives forever. I will never forget the moment I found it, that tiny piece of cheap jewelry glinting like a poisonous gem in the lamplight of my living room. My hands were shaking as I picked it up, turning it over in my palm while my mind raced to process what I was seeing. This earring, this insignificant little butterfly with its chipped paint and bent wing, was about to shatter everything I thought I knew about the two people I loved most in this world. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, from the moment my life was perfect, and I was too naive to see the storm clouds gathering on my horizon. My name is Tasha, and 5 years ago, I thought I had found my soulmate. Daniel walked into my life like something out of a romantic movie, all charm and easy smiles and promises that made me believe in forever. He was the kind of man who remembered small details about conversations we had weeks ago, who brought me coffee exactly the way I liked it without being asked, who could make me laugh until my sides hurt even on my worst days. We moved in together after dating for 8 months, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Our apartment became our sanctuary, filled with inside jokes and shared dreams and plans for a future that seemed as solid as the foundation beneath our feet. We talked about marriage constantly, about the house we would buy and the children we would have, and the life we would build together brick by brick. Daniel ran his own small construction business, and I was so proud of his entrepreneurial spirit. He worked hard, sometimes putting in 12-hour days to make sure his clients were satisfied. When he came home exhausted and covered in dust, I would massage his shoulders and listen to him talk about his projects and his dreams of expanding the business. I even helped him with his paperwork, organizing receipts and invoices because I was good with numbers and wanted to support him in every way I could. And then there was Brianna, my cousin, my best friend, my chosen sister. We had grown up together in the same small town, spending summers at our grandmother's house and sharing secrets that we swore we would take to our graves. She was 3 years younger than me, but she had always seemed so much more worldly and sophisticated. Where I was cautious and practical, she was bold and adventurous. Where I planned everything meticulously, she lived in the moment and trusted that everything would work out. When Brianna decided to move to the city to pursue her dreams of becoming a fashion designer, I was the one who helped her find an apartment and navigate the complexities of urban life. When she struggled to make ends meet, I was the one who bought her groceries and helped her pay her rent. When she needed someone to talk to about her dating disasters and career setbacks, I was always there with a listening ear and a shoulder to cry on. The three of us became inseparable. Daniel and Brianna got along beautifully from the moment I introduced them, and I was thrilled that the two most important people in my life genuinely liked each other. We would spend weekends together, going to movies and trying new restaurants and exploring the city like we were tourists in our own hometown. Daniel would joke that he had gotten 2 girlfriends for the price of one, and Brianna would laugh and say that she had finally found the brother she had always wanted. I should have paid more attention to how they looked at each other. I should have noticed the way their conversations continued even when I left the room, the way they seemed to have developed their own private jokes and references. I should have questioned why Brianna always seemed to know so much about Daniel's work schedule, and why Daniel always seemed to have opinions about Brianna's dating life. But I was blind. I was so secure in my relationships with both of them that the possibility of betrayal never even crossed my mind. When you trust people completely, when you love them with your whole heart, the idea that they might be capable of destroying you seems as impossible as the sun rising in the west. The first crack in my perfect world appeared about 6 months ago, though I did not recognize it for what it was at the time. Daniel started working later and later, coming home well after dark with apologies about demanding clients and unexpected complications. At first, I was understanding and supportive. I knew that running your own business meant irregular hours and unpredictable demands. But then the pattern became more frequent and more suspicious. He would get phone calls during dinner and step outside to take them, claiming they were work-related but speaking in hushed tones that seemed more intimate than professional. He started showering immediately when he got home, even on days when he claimed to have been doing paperwork rather than physical labor. His phone, which had always been casually accessible, suddenly became something he guarded jealously, keeping it face down and taking it with him even when he went to the bathroom. Around the same time, Brianna started behaving strangely too. She had always been the type to call me multiple times a week, usually to gossip about her coworkers or complain about her latest romantic disappointment. But suddenly, our conversations became shorter and more stilted. She would ask weird, specific questions about my schedule, wanting to know exactly when I would be working late or traveling for business. When we did spend time together, she seemed distracted and nervous, constantly checking her phone and making excuses to leave early. She stopped asking for my advice about men, stopped confiding in me about her problems, stopped treating me like the sister I had always been to her. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself that people go through phases, that relationships naturally ebb and flow, that I was reading too much into perfectly innocent changes in behavior. Daniel was just working hard to build his business. Brianna was just going through a period of independence and self-discovery. There was nothing sinister about any of it. But deep down, in the part of my soul that evolution had designed to detect danger, alarm bells were ringing constantly. My instincts were screaming that something was wrong, that the two people I trusted most were hiding something from me. I started having trouble sleeping, started feeling anxious for no reason I could name, started questioning every interaction, and analyzing every conversation for hidden meanings. The night I found the earring was the night everything changed. I had been working late on a particularly complex project, but I finished earlier than expected, and decided to surprise Daniel by coming home with his favorite takeout from the Thai restaurant down the street. I was looking forward to a quiet evening together, maybe watching a movie and talking about our days like we used to do before everything became so complicated and distant. But when I walked into our apartment, Daniel was not there. His jacket was draped over the back of the couch, and there was a half-empty beer bottle on the coffee table, but he was nowhere to be found. I called his name, thinking maybe he was in the shower or taking a nap, but there was no response. I sat down on the couch to wait for him, assuming he had just stepped out to run a quick errand. That was when I felt something hard and sharp pressing against my leg through the cushion. I reached down to investigate, thinking it was probably just a pen or a piece of loose change that had fallen between the cushions. Instead, my fingers closed around a small metal object that made my blood turn to ice water in my veins. I pulled it out and stared at it in disbelief, hoping against hope that I was somehow mistaken about what I was seeing. But there was no mistake. It was Brianna's butterfly earring, the cheap little piece of costume jewelry that she had borrowed from me 2 years ago and never returned. I had bought the set at a street fair, thinking they were cute and whimsical, but they were not expensive or particularly well made. The paint had started chipping almost immediately, and one of the wings had gotten bent when I accidentally caught it on my sweater. I knew this earring like I knew my own reflection. I had worn it dozens of times before Brianna admired it, and asked if she could borrow it for a date. I had said yes, of course, because that was what family did for each other. We shared clothes and jewelry and makeup without keeping score, without worrying about getting things back. But now, finding it embedded in my couch cushion, I realized that Brianna had been here. She had been in my apartment, on my furniture, doing God knows what while I was at work earning money to pay the rent on the home she was violating. I sat there for what felt like hours, holding that earring and trying to make sense of what it meant. Maybe there was an innocent explanation. Maybe Brianna had stopped by to visit Daniel, and the earring had fallen out accidentally. Maybe they had been planning a surprise for me and wanted to keep it secret. But even as I tried to convince myself of these possibilities, I knew they were lies. The earring had not been sitting on top of the cushions where it might have fallen during a casual visit. It had been buried deep, pushed down into the crevice between the cushions as if someone had been lying on the couch, as if it had been dislodged during some kind of physical activity that I did not want to think about. When Daniel finally came home 20 minutes later, he found me sitting exactly where I had been when I discovered the earring. I had hidden it in my closed fist, not ready to confront him until I had more information, more proof, more ammunition for the war I was beginning to realize I would have to fight. "Hey babe," he said, kissing the top of my head like he always did. "You are home early. How was your day?" I looked up at him, studying his face for signs of guilt or deception. His expression seemed normal, relaxed, maybe even genuinely happy to see me. But now I knew that Daniel was capable of lying to me with a straight face. and that knowledge poisoned every interaction we had from that moment forward. "Fine," I said, forcing my voice to sound casual. "Just finished up early and thought I would surprise you." "Where were you?" "Just went to grab some beer," he said, holding up a six-pack as evidence. "Ran into Mike from the hardware store and got to talking. You know how it is." I nodded and smiled, playing the role of the trusting girlfriend while my mind raced with questions and suspicions. If he had just gone to get beer, why was his jacket already on the couch when I arrived? If he had been talking to Mike, why did not he mention it when he first walked in? If this was such an innocent errand, why did I feel like he was performing a rehearsed explanation rather than simply telling me what had happened? That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling while Daniel slept peacefully beside me. I could feel the earring in my nightstand drawer like it was made of uranium, radiating toxic energy that contaminated everything around it. I knew I had to find out the truth, but I also knew that I could not simply confront them based on one piece of circumstantial evidence. If I was wrong, if there really was an innocent explanation, I would destroy my relationships with the two people I loved most based on paranoid suspicions. But if I was right, if they really were betraying me in the most intimate and devastating way possible, then I needed to be strategic about how I handled the situation. I decided to test them, to create an opportunity for them to reveal their true intentions. The plan formed in my mind over the course of several sleepless nights, and it was both simple and diabolical. I told Daniel that my company was sending me to a conference in another city for the weekend. It was a complete lie, but I delivered it with the same casual tone I used to discuss what we should have for dinner. I mentioned it in passing during breakfast on a Tuesday, saying that I would probably have to leave Friday afternoon and would not be back until Sunday evening. Daniel's reaction was everything I needed to confirm my worst fears. Instead of being disappointed that we would miss a weekend together, instead of asking about the conference or offering to drive me to the airport, he seemed almost relieved. He said all the right things about missing me and wishing the weekend would go by quickly, but his body language told a completely different story. His shoulders relaxed, his smile became more genuine, and I could practically see the wheels turning in his head as he started making plans for my absence. Then I called Brianna and casually mentioned that I would be out of town for the weekend, asking if she wanted to hang out while I was gone. Her response was even more telling than Daniel's. She stumbled over her words, claimed she already had plans, and seemed almost panicked at the suggestion that we might spend time together. "I wish I could," she said, her voice unnaturally high and strained. "But I already promised this guy from work that I would help him move." Rain check. A guy from work. Right. In all the years I had known Brianna, she had never voluntarily helped anyone move anything heavier than a purse. She was the type of person who hired movers to relocate her houseplants. But suddenly, she was so committed to manual labor that she could not spend time with her beloved cousin who was going to be alone and lonely in a strange city. I told both of them that I understood, that these things happened, that we would catch up when I got back. And then I set about preparing for the most important performance of my life. I left for my fake conference on Friday afternoon, making sure to pack a suitcase and say goodbye to Daniel with the appropriate amount of affection and regret. I drove to a hotel across town and checked in under my own name, creating a paper trail that would prove I had really been out of town if anyone ever questioned my whereabouts. But instead of staying at the hotel, I returned to my apartment building and let myself into the vacant unit across the hall from mine. The landlord was a friend of mine, and I had helped him out with some bookkeeping in exchange for the favor of borrowing the empty apartment for the weekend. I told him I was planning a surprise party and needed a place to coordinate without my boyfriend finding out, which was not technically a lie. From my vantage point across the hallway, I had a perfect view of everyone who came and went from my apartment. I also had the keys to get back inside whenever I needed to retrieve evidence or plant surveillance equipment. The hidden camera I installed was a tiny, wireless device that I had purchased online specifically for this purpose. I positioned it on the bookshelf where it would capture the entire living room, including the couch where I had found Brianna's earring. The device was connected to an app on my phone, so I could watch the live feed and record everything that happened while I was supposedly hundreds of miles away. I did not have to wait long for my suspicions to be confirmed. Brianna arrived at my apartment at 7:30 on Friday evening, using the spare key that I had given her for emergencies. She let herself in like she owned the place, like she had every right to be there while I was gone. Daniel was already there, of course. He had probably been counting down the minutes until my departure, probably had been planning this rendezvous from the moment I mentioned my fake business trip. Watching them together on my phone screen was like being stabbed in the heart repeatedly with a rusty knife. They moved around my apartment with the casual familiarity of people who had done this many times before. They raided my refrigerator and drank my wine and curled up on my couch like they were a real couple enjoying a quiet evening at home. But it was the intimacy between them that really destroyed me. The way Daniel touched Brianna's hair. The way she laughed at his jokes. The way they looked at each other with the kind of longing and affection that I had thought were reserved exclusively for me. They were not just having a physical affair. They were emotionally connected, genuinely caring about each other in a way that made their betrayal so much worse than simple lust or opportunity. I watched them kiss on my couch. The same couch where Daniel and I had planned our future together. I watched them whisper to each other and giggle like teenagers. I watched them treat my home like their personal love nest, completely oblivious to the fact that their victim was watching every moment of their deception. But I did not cry. I did not scream. I did not rush across the hallway to confront them with righteous fury and broken-hearted accusations. Instead, I sat in that empty apartment and planned their destruction with the cold, calculating precision of a military strategist. You see, I knew things about both of them that they probably wished I did not know. When you love people, when you trust them completely, they tell you their secrets. They confide in you about their mistakes and their fears and their vulnerabilities. They assume that your love will protect them, that your loyalty will keep their secrets safe forever. They were wrong. Daniel thought I was just helping him organize his business finances out of love and support. What he did not realize was that I had been documenting every questionable transaction, every cash payment that went unreported, every expense that was inflated or fabricated. His construction business was profitable, but not as profitable as he claimed on his tax returns. He had been skimming money and hiding income for years, thinking that his charm and my apparent naivety would protect him from scrutiny. I had copies of everything: bank statements, invoices, receipts, contracts. All of it stored safely in my personal files as insurance against exactly this kind of betrayal. Daniel had no idea that his loving, supportive girlfriend had been inadvertently building a case against him for tax evasion and fraud. As for Brianna, her situation was even more precarious. She was in the country on a student visa that had expired 2 years ago, but she had been too scared and too broke to deal with the immigration bureaucracy. Instead, she had been living here illegally, working under the table, and lying on every official document she touched. When she applied for a work visa last year, she had asked me to serve as a character reference. I had written a glowing letter about her integrity and reliability, describing her as a model citizen who would be a valuable addition to the American workforce. The immigration office had my contact information, my professional credentials, and my sworn statement vouching for Brianna's character and circumstances. What they did not know was that Brianna had lied about almost everything on her application. She claimed to be single and living alone, but she had been cohabiting with a series of boyfriends to save money on rent. She claimed to have stable employment, but she had been fired from 3 jobs in the past year for chronic lateness and poor performance. She claimed to have no criminal record, but she had been arrested twice for shoplifting, though the charges had been dropped. I had all of this information because Brianna had confided in me during our late-night phone calls and weekend shopping trips. She had told me about her legal troubles and her immigration status because she trusted me to keep her secrets. She had asked for my help with her visa application because she believed that I would always be there to support her, no matter what. She was wrong about that too. Sitting in that empty apartment, watching my boyfriend and my cousin betray me in real time, I realized that I had been given an extraordinary opportunity. They had not just broken my heart. They had handed me the weapons I needed to destroy them both. I spent the rest of the weekend documenting their affair and preparing my counterattack. I recorded hours of video footage showing them together in my apartment. I photographed the evidence they left behind: wine glasses, takeout containers, clothing items that clearly belonged to both of them. I compiled a comprehensive dossier of their relationship, complete with timestamps and detailed descriptions of their activities. But more importantly, I organized all the legal ammunition I would need to ruin their lives completely. On Monday morning, I returned home from my fake business trip with appropriate stories about boring conference sessions and mediocre hotel food. Daniel and Brianna both called to welcome me back, asking about my weekend with the kind of exaggerated interest that guilty people use to seem normal. I played my part perfectly, complaining about work stress and expressing gratitude for their concern. I told Daniel how much I had missed him and suggested that we plan a romantic evening to make up for lost time. I told Brianna that I wanted to hear all about her weekend helping her coworker move, asking detailed questions about the experience that made her stammer and contradict herself. They thought they had gotten away with it. They thought their secret was safe, that their betrayal had gone undetected, that they could continue their affair indefinitely while I remained oblivious and trusting. They could not have been more wrong. I waited exactly 1 week before I struck. I wanted to give them time to relax, to let their guard down, to start planning their next rendezvous. I wanted them to feel secure in their deception so that the eventual revelation would be even more devastating. On the following Monday, I made my first move. I called the IRS tip line and filed an anonymous report about Daniel's business practices. I provided them with specific details about his unreported income, his falsified expenses, and his pattern of tax evasion. I did not give them everything at once. I wanted them to discover the evidence through their own investigation, so that it would be more credible and more damaging. The beauty of reporting tax fraud is that it sets in motion a process that cannot be stopped or controlled. Once the IRS decides to audit someone, they dig deep and they dig thoroughly. They subpoena bank records and interview clients and examine every transaction with the suspicious attention of people who are paid to catch liars. Daniel got the letter 2 weeks later. I was there when he opened it, watching his face go pale as he read the official notification that he was being audited. His hands were shaking as he set the letter down on the kitchen table. And when he looked up at me, I saw real fear in his eyes for the first time since I had known him. "What is this about?" I asked, playing the role of the concerned girlfriend. "What does it mean?" "I do not know," he said, but his voice was weak and unconvincing. "Probably just a random audit. These things happen sometimes." But we both knew it was not random. Audits like this, comprehensive investigations that went back years and examined every aspect of a business, did not happen by accident. Someone had provided the IRS with specific information. Someone who knew enough about Daniel's practices to point investigators in exactly the right direction. Daniel hired a lawyer, of course, but lawyers are expensive and investigations take time. While he waited to learn his fate, his business began to suffer. Clients started canceling contracts because they did not want to be associated with someone under federal investigation. Suppliers demanded payment in advance because they were worried about his financial stability. His reputation, which had taken years to build, was destroyed in a matter of weeks. But I was not finished with him yet. While Daniel was dealing with his tax problems, I turned my attention to Brianna. Her case required a more delicate approach because immigration law is complex and unforgiving. I could not simply make an anonymous phone call and let bureaucrats handle the rest. I had to be more strategic, more personal in my attack. I started by contacting the immigration office that was processing Brianna's visa application. I told them that I needed to update the character reference I had provided, that I had discovered new information that was relevant to their decision. The immigration officer was polite but businesslike. She explained that character references could be updated or withdrawn at any time before a final decision was made, and she scheduled an appointment for me to provide my revised statement. When I arrived at the immigration office the following week, I brought a folder full of evidence that would destroy Brianna's chances of staying in the country legally. I had screenshots from social media showing her living with various boyfriends, contradicting her claim to be single and living alone. I had copies of termination letters from her former employers, disproving her claim to have stable employment. I had documentation of her expired student visa and her failure to maintain legal status. But the most damaging evidence was the video footage from my hidden camera. I had edited together a compilation showing Brianna clearly engaged in a romantic relationship while living in my apartment, which contradicted multiple claims she had made on her visa application. "I am afraid I need to retract my previous reference," I told the immigration officer. "I have discovered that Miss Rodriguez made several false statements on her application, and I cannot in good conscience continue to vouch for her character." The officer reviewed my evidence with the kind of thorough attention that made my heart race with anticipation. She asked questions about the timeline of events, about the nature of my relationship with Brianna, about how I had obtained the video footage. I answered everything honestly, explaining that I had discovered the affair accidentally and felt obligated to report the immigration violations. "This is very serious," the officer said finally. "False statements on a visa application are grounds for immediate denial and potential deportation. We will need to investigate these claims thoroughly." I left that office feeling lighter than I had in months. The machinery of justice was now grinding toward both of my betrayers, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. The results exceeded even my most optimistic expectations. Daniel's audit revealed exactly what I knew it would reveal: years of tax evasion, unreported income, and fraudulent business expenses. The IRS assessed penalties and interest that totaled more than twice what he actually owed in back taxes. His business accounts were frozen while they calculated the final amount, leaving him unable to pay his bills or meet his existing contract obligations. Within 2 months, Daniel was facing bankruptcy. His business collapsed completely as clients fled and creditors demanded payment. He had to sell his truck, his tools, and everything else of value to try to satisfy the government's demands. The man who had once been so proud of his entrepreneurial success was reduced to asking his family for loans and looking for work as a day laborer. But the financial devastation was nothing compared to the criminal charges that followed. The IRS referred his case to the Department of Justice for prosecution, and Daniel found himself facing federal charges for tax evasion and fraud. His lawyer advised him to take a plea deal rather than risk a trial that he would almost certainly lose. Daniel pled guilty to 3 felony counts and was sentenced to 18 months in federal prison followed by 3 years of supervised probation. The judge also ordered him to pay full restitution to the government, plus additional fines and penalties that would keep him financially crippled for decades. Brianna's downfall was even more swift and comprehensive. The immigration office acted on my evidence within days, denying her visa application and issuing a deportation order. She was given 30 days to leave the country voluntarily or face arrest and forced removal. She called me in tears when she got the notification, not knowing that I was the one who had destroyed her chances of staying in America. She begged me to help her find a lawyer, to write another character reference, to do something to save her from deportation. "I do not understand what happened," she sobbed into the phone. "They said someone provided evidence that I lied on my application, but I do not know what they are talking about." I made appropriate sympathetic noises while secretly savoring every moment of her panic and desperation. "Maybe there was just a misunderstanding," I suggested. "Maybe if you explain the situation, they will reconsider." But there was no misunderstanding, and there would be no reconsideration. The evidence against her was overwhelming and indisputable. She had lied on a federal document, and now she was facing the consequences of that decision. Brianna left the country 3 weeks later, returning to Mexico with nothing but a suitcase full of clothes and a heart full of regret. She had lost her job, her apartment, her friends, and her future in America because she had chosen to betray the one person who had always been there for her. As for their relationship, it did not survive the pressure of their respective disasters. Daniel was too busy trying to avoid prison time to maintain a romance with someone who was being deported. Brianna was too focused on her legal troubles to care about a man who could not even keep his own life together. They turned on each other with the same ruthless selfishness they had shown me. Daniel blamed Brianna for distracting him from his business responsibilities. Brianna blamed Daniel for getting her involved with someone who was under federal investigation. They ended their affair the same way they had begun it, with lies, accusations, and complete disregard for anyone else's feelings. The last I heard, Daniel was serving his sentence at a minimum security federal prison in another state. He will be released eventually, but his reputation is permanently destroyed and his financial future is non-existent. He will spend the rest of his life working low-paying jobs, and sending most of his earnings to the government to pay off his debts. Brianna is back in Mexico, living with her parents and working at a call center for a fraction of what she used to make. She has been banned from entering the United States for 10 years because of her visa violations, and even after that time period expires, her history of immigration fraud will make it nearly impossible for her to get approved for any kind of legal status. They both tried to contact me after their lives fell apart, looking for sympathy and support from the woman they had betrayed so callously. Daniel wrote me letters from prison, claiming that he had made a mistake and begging for forgiveness. Brianna sent me messages through social media, asking if I could help her find a way back to America. I ignored them both. They had made their choices, and now they were living with the consequences. I felt no pity for their suffering because they had brought it entirely upon themselves. As for me, I emerged from this experience stronger and wiser than I had ever been before. I sold the apartment that had been contaminated by their betrayal and bought a beautiful house in a better neighborhood. I started my own consulting business, using the skills I had developed helping Daniel with his finances to help other people manage their money legally and ethically. My business has been incredibly successful, partly because of my expertise and partly because word has gotten around about what happened to my ex-boyfriend who tried to cheat on his taxes. People trust me to handle their financial affairs because they know I have no tolerance for dishonesty or fraud. I am happier now than I was when I thought I was living the perfect life with Daniel. I have learned that a relationship built on lies and deception is not worth preserving, no matter how much history you share or how much you thought you loved each other. I have learned that family loyalty is not unconditional, that blood relationships do not excuse betrayal, and that sometimes the people closest to you are the ones most capable of destroying you. But most importantly, I have learned that I am capable of protecting myself in ways I never imagined. When I found that butterfly earring under my couch cushion, I thought my world was ending. Instead, it was the beginning of a new chapter in my life, one where I am the author of my own story and the architect of my own justice. Daniel and Brianna thought they could betray me and get away with it because they saw me as weak and trusting and naive. They thought I would be too devastated by their affair to fight back, too loyal to family and romantic love to seek revenge. They were wrong about everything. I am not the same woman who used to massage Daniel's shoulders after his long workdays. I am not the same cousin who used to bail Brianna out of her financial troubles and listen to her romantic problems. I am someone stronger, someone smarter, someone who learned that the best revenge is not getting mad, it is getting even. And I got even in the most thorough and devastating way possible. I did not just break up their affair. I did not just expose their betrayal. I destroyed their entire lives with the same methodical precision they had used to destroy my trust. Some people might say I went too far, that I should have been satisfied with simply ending the relationship and cutting ties with both of them. Some people might argue that revenge is wrong, that I should have taken the high road and focused on healing rather than retaliation. But those people have never had their hearts ripped out by the two people they loved most in the world. They have never discovered that their entire life was built on lies and deception. They have never felt the unique agony of betrayal by blood and love combined. I regret nothing. Daniel and Brianna made their choices when they decided to sneak around behind my back, when they decided to use my home as their secret meeting place, when they decided that their selfish desires were more important than my feelings or our relationships. I simply made choices of my own. I chose truth over loyalty. I chose justice over forgiveness. I chose my own well-being over their comfort and security. And I chose to make sure that their betrayal cost them everything, just as their betrayal had cost me everything I thought I had. The butterfly earring that started this whole saga is still in my jewelry box, not because I want to remember the pain it caused me, but because I want to remember the strength it helped me discover. Every time I look at it, I am reminded that I am capable of surviving anything, of fighting back against anyone who tries to destroy me, of rebuilding my life from the ashes of other people's betrayal. Daniel and Brianna thought they were so clever, so smooth, so untouchable. They thought they had found the perfect crime, an affair that would give them everything they wanted while leaving their victim none the wiser. Instead, they had found their perfect downfall. Because when you betray someone who knows all your secrets, when you underestimate someone who has access to all your vulnerabilities, When you assume that love makes people weak instead of making them dangerous, you learn exactly how wrong you can be. They wanted to ruin my life with lies and lust. I destroyed their lives with truth and timing. And now, while they are both struggling to rebuild from the ashes of their own making, I am thriving in ways I never thought possible. Cheat on me once, shame on you. Cheat on me with my own blood? Well, I hope karma packed a lunch, because in their case, she decided to stay for the rest of their lives. If this story of ultimate betrayal and perfect revenge left you speechless, please subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our latest uploads, and let us know in the comments what you thought about this shocking case of family betrayal and cold-blooded justice. Your support means the world to us and helps us bring you more amazing content.